Good day, everyone. I am Trixie Nicole Nobong, and this is my Mastery Learning Task number 1. Unit 1.1 Qualities of Quantitative Research. Objectives. In this lesson, you should be able to do the following: describe the characteristics of quantitative research, identify the strengths and weaknesses of quantitative research, discuss the different kinds of quantitative research, and evaluate topics that can be studied quantitatively. Quantitative research, from its root word quantity, which means the amount of or number of. Quantitative research deals with numericals and how it can describe a phenomenon or infer a relationship. Quantitative research is the go-to approach for scientific inquiry because of its ability to test hypotheses, the relationship of different factors that we see creates a clearer picture of what is happening around us. These factors can also be called variables, which are the basis for formulating and testing hypotheses. Variables are traits that numerically describe or giving meaning to an object, phenomenon, or group of people. These variables vary or change from one thing to another. Examples of variables are the height of a chair, the weight of a person, test scores of a student, or the speed of a car. Remember, variables are an important concept in research. They are the ones that are usually identified, examined, described, or correlated with answering a scientific inquiry. Characteristics of quantitative research. Quantitative research deals with numbers, and the following is a list of characteristics of quantitative research. Controllability. To understand a specific relationship or phenomenon, quantitative research should be in an environment where all variables are identified and can be controlled. Second one is the generalizability. It is from larger sample sizes that the results are based on as a representative of the population. Third one is the objectivity. The results of the data are observable and measurable using structured instruments. Lastly, replicability. The research study should be replicable by other teams of researchers that will eventually come up with similar outcomes. Strengths of quantitative research. The factual quality of quantitative research and its generalizability to a population becomes the basis of its strengths. Queiroz, Faria, and Almeida 2017, who are researchers from Portugal, published a paper evaluating the strengths and limitations of qualitative and quantitative research approaches. In this subsection, we are going to list down briefly describe each of the strengths of quantitative research. First one, analysis of data is assisted with statistical methods. These are mathematical tools in which numbers can be processed to become more meaningful. Simple statistical measures such as determining the mean, median, and mode of a dataset can also assist researchers in reducing the bulk of data to make it easier to understand. Analysis using statistics also provides unbiased results. Second one, large-scale research can be undertaken. Due to many data collection methods that can be employed in quantitative research that are relatively easy to administer, a research with a large number of samples is possible. This also allows researchers to make a more comprehensive and generalizable conclusion for the entire population. Lastly, data can be represented in graphical and tabular form. Other than statistical analysis, researchers can analyze data using graphical or tabular representation. Numerical data summarized in tabular or graphical form aid researchers in making sense of them better. Weaknesses of quantitative research. The following list describes the weaknesses of quantitative research. A large sample size requires a lot of time and effort. The goal to generalize the results of quantitative studies requires a larger sample size, which can be an issue for many researchers. This requirement increases the cost of research and its time frame becomes longer. Second one, statistical analysis of data requires an expert to perform. Poor knowledge of inadequate skills in statistics might negatively affect the outcome of a study. Lastly, quantifying and reducing observations to just pieces of numerical values makes it too simplistic. Numerical values can only answer the question of what, and it is often difficult to use these values in answering the whys and hows of the phenomenon. Types of quantitative research. Quantitative research can generally be categorized into two, experimental and non-experimental types. These two types are used by researchers depending on the topic and the nature of the problem that is being investigated. Descriptive research. Descriptive quantitative research is an example of a non-experimental research design. The focus of this research design is to describe factors, variables, or phenomena that occur in nature. For example, you want to identify factors that contribute to the spoilage of food. We know that there might be 1,000 reasons why food spoils, but the best way to narrow it is to survey people that know about food spoilage. From there, only one can analyze the data by using descriptive statistics by calculating the mean, median, and mode. From the result of the survey conducted, for example, you observed that the frequency for temperature as a factor is the highest. It means that almost all of your research respondents say that temperature is a factor in food spoilage. Comparative research. This is another example of a non experimental research design. The primary objective of comparative research, also called causal comparative research, is to compare two variables in order to identify whether there exists a causative relationship between them. This kind of research usually involves two or more groups and one independent variable. For example, you want to know if participating in a school summer program is the cause of students' increased class participation. You identified two groups of students who enrolled in the summer program and those who did not. Then, you collected data about their class participation. After analyzing the data gathered, you concluded that the summer program helped the students in participating more in class. Tip: in order to identify which research design best suits your inquiry, determine your purpose first in doing the research. Correlational research. This is another example of a non experimental research design. Its primary objective is to compare two variables and identify the relationship between them. For example, you want to know if there is a relationship between the length of sleep and students' productivity. You can collect data for the length of sleep by asking students about their bedtime and waking up time. For student productivity, let's say the number of activities being finished in every day defines student productivity. After gathering your data and subjecting it into statistical analysis, you found out that the closer the length of sleep to 8 hours, the higher the number of activities being done by a student. Through this, you can now identify that there exists a direct relationship between the length of sleep and student productivity. Quasi-experimental research. Quasi-experimental research mirrors experimental research, but it is not true. Experimental research where a causal relationship can be determined with the use of dependent and independent variables. Quasi-experiments differ because the random selection of samples is not possible due to innate or ethical reasons. For example, you want to know the effect of height on milk brand preference. True experiments would have to randomly assign participants to groups where they would be subjected to taste tests in order to know which brand they prefer. However, because height is an innate characteristic of a person, participants cannot be randomly assigned to groups. Instead, you have to group participants based on their height. True experimental research. The primary objective of a true experimental research design is to identify a cause effect relationship between the variables where the samples are randomized. One of the earliest experiments that we have done is when we are trying to understand plant needs. For us to find out if sunlight affects the growth of plants, we are asked by our teacher to create three different setups. Set A is to grow a seed that will receive ample amount of sunlight. Set B is a seed that will placed where sunlight is limited. And set C is a seed where that will placed completely in the dark. All of them will be planted in the same type of soil and will be given equal amounts of water. After several days, we discovered that set A grew perfectly. Set B grew, but it leaned toward the source of light, while set C did not grow at all. Review. Independent variable is the variable that is manipulated. Dependent variable is the variable that is dependent on the independent variable, and this is the value being measured. In this experimental research design, a causal relationship can be determined between the dependent variable, which is the growth of the plant, and the independent variables, which are the amount of soil, type of soil, and the amount of water. In more complex experimental research, a large sample size is required so that results can be generalized to an entire population. This is done by the process of sampling where respondents for a study are randomly selected from a population. Guide. Just by reading a research paper's abstract, you can get an understanding of the nature of the study's objectives. A conclusion that attempts to generalize a phenomenon or a relationship can immediately point us to quantitative research. Another clue that we can observe is the presence of different statistical values, such as the p-value that or the Greek letter that indicates a correlation, or descriptive statistics, mean, median, or mode. If the variable is discrete, then it can be quantified. Another guide. The presence of the word effect is indicative that the research study aims to understand a cause and effect relationship that is attributed to comparative, experimental, or quasi experimental research. The word relationship or correlation gives us a clue that the research study is either a comparative or a correlational study. Introduction to quantitative research. Characteristics of quantitative research. Quantitative research is commonly used in natural sciences research problems because of the following characteristics. Large sample size. To obtain more meaningful statistical results, the data must come from a large sample size. Number two, objectivity. Data gathering and analysis of results are done accurately, objectively, and are unaffected by the researcher's intuition and personal guesses. Third, concise visual presentation. Data is numerical, which makes presentation through graphs, charts, and tables possible and with better conveyance and interpretation. 4. Faster data analysis. The use of a statistical tools gives way for a less time consuming data analysis. Number 5. Generalized data. Data taken from a sample can be applied to the population of sampling is done accordingly. Sufficient size and random samples were taken. Number 6. Fast and easy data collection. Depending on the type of data needed, collection can be quick and easy. Quantitative research uses standardized research instruments that allow the researcher to collect data from a large sample size efficiently. For instance, a single survey form can be administered simultaneously to collect various measurable characteristics like age, gender, socioeconomic status, and etc. Number 7, reliable data. Data is taken and analyzed objectively from a sample as a representative of the population, making it more credible and reliable for policy making and decision making. Lastly, high replicability. The quantitative method can be repeated to verify findings, enhancing its validity, free from false or immature conclusions. Advantages of quantitative research. The following are the advantages of quantitative research or its strengths. Number one, very objective. Number two, numerical and quantifiable data can be used to predict outcomes. Number three, findings are generaliz- generalizab- generalizable to the population. Number four, there is conclusive establishment of cause and effect. Number five, fast and easy data analysis using statistical software. Number six, fast and easy data gathering. Number seven, quantitative research can be replicated or repeated. Lastly, validity and reliability can be established. Disadvantages of quantitative research. The following are the disadvantages of quantitative research or its weaknesses. Number one, it lacks the necessary data to explore a problem or concept in depth. Number two, it does not provide comprehensive explanation of human experiences. Number three, some information cannot be described by numerical data such as feelings and beliefs. Number four, the research design is rigid and not very flexible. Number five, the participants are limited to choose only from the given responses. Number six, the respondents may tend to provide inaccurate responses. And lastly, a large sample size makes data collection more costly.